Welcome to the meeting of council, November the 19th, 2019. We'll have a moment of silence. Approval of the agenda.
It's moved by Councillor Rick Owens, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council approves the agenda for its regular meeting of November 19th, 2019 as presented.
All in favor? Passed. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Councillor Perrier?
Yeah, I would like to remove myself for the discussion over the Nettie Lake, the discussion they're gonna add towards,
Okay.
I guess, amendments and that they wanna make out there.
Okay, duly noted. Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I'm declaring pecuniary interest on 6.3C, request for change to the overall operating authority for sewage collection. My pecuniary interest is that both my wife and son work in the sewage collection, and this particular motion could affect my son's job.
Duly noted. Petitions and delegations, none noted. Acceptance of minutes and recommendations.
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council accepts the minutes of the following meetings. The regular meeting of council held November 5th, 2019. The meeting to open tax sale tenders held November 6th, 2019. The special meeting of council held November 6th, 2019. And the emergency special meeting of council held November 13th, 2019.
All in favor? Passed. Reports of municipal officers and communications. Treasurer Sherry Matthews.
So we have three reports. The first two kind of go together. The first one is to do with the annual repayment limit. So what it is we're looking for, the report's being presented to council because in order to meet the requirements under the Municipal Act, we have to bring this to council to have them, sorry, let me start again. It's just being presented because we need a council to adopt this report by resolution because it's required under the Municipal Act. So what happens is that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing gives us the annual repayment limit each year. They issue it. I think it comes out in February, and it's dated January the 1st. So what happens is we got the January 1st, 2019 one, but what happens is it's actually based on the financial information return from 2017. So what the Municipal Act requires is if there are changes in your debt, the fact that we want to go out and have additional debt, we have to recalculate the amount that we're allowed to go out and get sorry, having a rough day here. So basically what it is you'll see in the second report, we are asking for, we need to do the financing for the loader. So because of that, we need to bring this to council. So what it is I would ask if you flip to page 2, the top numbers that you'll see, the 3 million, that was the amount that was on the original annual repayment limit from the ministry. So the second box you'll see, it's basically all the adjustments that have happened to the debt since December 31st of 2017. So if we just quickly go through them, we had the debenture for the pool, which came on in 2018, so that's reflected. We had the King George Court project financing, which we received in 2019. It's over 2 years, so you'll see one annual payment there. The NOHFC loan, we have a new schedule, that's reflected. The fourth item you'll see is basically why we're bringing it is because the loader financing. And then we had some debt come off. So we had some vehicle loans come off in 2018 and the Heritage North loan is now finished. So the net adjustments is $782,000. So what you'll see in the third box is that the total net adjusted debt payments would now be close to $2 million. So when we take all that into effect, instead of the annual repayment limit being $3 million, it's now 2.2. So just to put it in perspective, if you flip to page 3, I just wanted to show, so you'll see the annual repayment limit unadjusted where it was 3 million versus the annual repayment limit adjusted of the 2.2. So I'm just gonna pick the bottom line. So if you were to now say that you needed to go and get a loan for $13 million, 5 years, 5%, that would now put you at your limit. If you were to go over that limit, you'd have to get Ontario Municipal Board approval. So as I say, this is more just, we do need the resolution, because we're going for the financing for the loader, so I wanted to bring that. The other thing I will mention though is, so anytime that council is going to be approving new debt, this should be recalculated so that you have an idea of what your annual repayment limit is. And I'm just throwing out some, so you know, when we when council has to approve for, say, the Swastika upgrade, if TPR, if a TPR upgrade goes ahead and you need financing for that, anything like that, you would need to redo the limit to just have, to know what you're allowed to get. Okay? So that brings us to, oh, sorry.
Okay. So it's moved by Councillor Rick Owens, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council adopts the report updated, update to annual repayment limit, the ARL, by resolution as required under the Municipal Act 2002, Ontario Regulation 403/02.
All in favor? Passed.
Okay, so the next one is the financing for the loader. So just a bit of background. So as part of the 2019 capital budget, there was a budget for the loader. The amount has come in within the budget. There was a bylaw 19076 that authorized the purchase agreement for the loader. We received it at the end, close to the end of October, so now we have to do the financing for it. So some of the things where we tried to, we did get rates. I asked for rates from 3 different places for a 5-year and a 10-year term. I would suggest the 10-year term only for the fact that we amortize it over 20 years, so that just seemed to be a better time frame. And the other thing is, when you do a little bit of reading on the debt financing for the municipality, what it says is that by borrowing, it allows the cost of the purchase to be spread over the whole life, or over the useful life of the asset, but it also allows for the cost to be paid not by just today's taxpayers, but into the future, and those are the people that benefit from the use of the loader. So, just to be clear though, just because of the timing of when the loader came and when the council meetings were, we have gone ahead and paid the invoice, so there will be no late charges on it. So the financing will come after that. So I asked for rates from 2 major financial institutions and also Infrastructure Ontario, and I have listed the results under the options. So Infrastructure Ontario offered the best rate, and when I say best rate, I say that's the lowest rate over a 10-year term. They do not have, though, a prepayment option. If you were trying to break the loan early, there would be a cost to that. And the other thing that the fellow I was dealing with to get some information, he mentioned that their deadline for applications was on October the 28th for 2019 applications, so this would have to go into 2020. He said, though, that we would probably have the funds by mid-January of 2020 if we were to go ahead. And as far as, like I say, we have paid the invoice, so that is not an issue. The thing with Infrastructure Ontario is they have very specific procedures that they follow. They will actually give us a lot of the documentation, like a bylaw and everything. They do them up, and we just have to insert our information. But they do require involvement of legal counsel. As far as TD Canada Trust, they offered the next best rate over the 10-year term. The initial rates I got from the fellow, it turns out that they were with the same type of prepayment option that the council chose under the Aquatic Center. But I did go back to him and ask him what it would be as if there was no prepayment option, so there's a 0.05% difference, which would be lower if we don't have a prepayment option. And he said as far as getting the funds, it would be at least a 14 business day required to obtain the proceeds. As far as RBC, they had the highest rate of the 10. So my little comment at the bottom here is, so after taking into account the estimated legal fees, and I just had to estimate it, I don't know for sure how much it would be, and the lost interest income, because what I'm saying is we've had to pay that invoice and we would not get the funds at least until January of 2020. Even factoring all that in, the best rate still would be the Infrastructure Ontario one. So that is the recommendation that council direct staff to arrange the financing for the 2019 capital budget acquisition of the loader through Infrastructure Ontario using a 10-year term.
The life cycle, Sherry, for this loader, it is 20 years reasonable?
Well, that's the only, sorry, that's the thing. As far as amortizing, our tangible capital asset policy says 20 years. What I would caution is that the one that we used as a trade-in was only 10 years old. So I don't know life cycle, how long they last, but that one in particular lasted, that we're trading in, was 10 years. But the policy is 20 years for that type of equipment,
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was purchased new or used at the time.
and I'm not sure.
Councillor Owen?
Perhaps we could ask, I see Eve is here, perhaps we could ask him or Steve what the normal life expectancy of that type of equipment is? You don't have to come up, just yell it and I'll repeat it. The answer is 12 to 15 years.
Okay. Any further comments or questions?
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council directs staff to arrange financing for the 2019 capital budget acquisition of a loader through Infrastructure Ontario using a 10-year term.
All in favor? Passed. 2019 operating results to date?
So I am not going to read all of the notes that are attached to this, but what I would like to just make a few comments and then if there's any questions. So I'm going to basically concentrate on schedules 4 to 6. 1 to 3 were provided as attachments to the last one, just to kind of give you a prelude to what we would be talking about today. But I did want to make some cautions. So keep in mind that the town does not do accruals on a monthly basis. So basically, me picking October 29th made no difference between October 29th and October 31st. What we do is we always do the accruals at year end, which is kind of why it takes sometimes so long to get everything finalized, because we also have to get all the invoices through Treasury and paid, but we also have to wait for those invoices sometimes to come from vendors, which I find funny that we don't get them on a prompt basis, but that is what happens. So as part of these results, you'll notice I said that when analyzing it, just to keep in mind, if you were to take 9 months out of 12, that'd be 75%. And I say 9 months because some of the results here only reflected payments up to September. That's just the timing of it. Some of them we get them at the first of the month and we paid them, so by the end of October, you were looking at 10 months out of 12 and it's 83%. And so the other one I just wanted to mention is as far as payroll, we are paid bi-weekly at the town, so it's, by the time I ran these results, there were 21 pays out of 26, so you're roughly looking at 81%. Some of the other cautions I wanted to, and so just an overall, when I was trying to look at the variances, what I was noticing is a couple things. Our legal accounts, a lot of those are under right now, but I will caution there as well. Those invoices typically come later. Electricity, that's another one. Obviously, it's an estimate. Now we're headed into our cooler temperatures, but I noticed that a lot of those were under as well. So other than that, there are some things we have identified that are under. And as part of the 2020 budget process, those will probably need to be taken into account. So I'll put those in a folder just so that they're taken into account in 2020 so that they're not lost or forgotten, just because for whatever reason they weren't able to be completed in 2019. The other thing I did want to say too is, as far as reserve and reserve funds, it would be great if we could get a policy. I don't know that that's going to get done before December. That being said, if, for an example, if you were to find that the winter control, if the expenses were under what was anticipated, you might want to consider a winter control reserve and have that so that in years, whether you're over or under, you can use that to draw and then kind of take the fluctuations out. Another one, and I'll mention that when we get to the notes, is for an example for the police. So we have the town has a contract with the OPP. But what will happen is, we just got the 2020 billing statement, and what happens is they do adjustments, but the adjustment for 2020 shows the 2018 adjustment. So, to let you know, then what's gonna happen is the 2018 adjustment, I'm accruing that in 2019 because it relates to a prior year. It was $98,000. You didn't know that when the budget was done. But here's an example for 2015 and 2016, money was actually paid back to the town, so the billing was reduced. So there again, that's another example of maybe you want to consider having a police reserve, police contingency reserve, just so that you can take those fluctuations out. But, cause like I say, that's the billing process, it works, it's 2 years behind. So I'm just wanted to throw those out. So then as far as the notes, there were just some that I wanted to mention. As far as treasury, here's another one too, is that I have mentioned in the second point under note number 3 for treasury that the tax write-offs related to assessment appeals are $75,000 over. That's another one. The appeals are submitted. We have no way of knowing when those will get resolved. As it stands right now, we're $75,000 over. And then the third, the one underneath it says the tax write-offs. Currently, we're $104,000 under, but we always review the outstanding tax list with the auditors, and that could change if the allowance needs to be increased, because that's where it would come out of, is that one that's under. As far as treasury, again, the interest income, it is higher than we budgeted, but currently it's being offset by the fact that there's other revenues that are under by the same amount. If we flip to number 8 for the police, I did mention that, that's why it looks to be under, because we were only billed to September in these results, but it's offset by the $98,000 2018 adjustment. As far as roads, I did mention the winter control. As far as, you'll just see there's a point, it says the salt is under and the sand are under. There's an example, we have it, it's been purchased, the invoice just isn't reflected in here yet. If we flip to waste management, under recoveries, we're mentioning that we're under on the recoveries, but that's another example. We receive the payments from Stewardship Ontario on a quarterly basis, and these results only reflect the first 2 quarters because we haven't received the other ones yet. And my understanding is there is going to be a sale of scrap metal, so that will be additional income when that happens. As far as the health unit, I just wanted to comment that when it says no variance, because there again, we've been billed for the whole year, so there is no variance. If you look at the ambulance, the child care, ones that were billed through DSAB, those ones were billed up to October, so you're looking at 10 out of 12 months for those. If you flip to number 23 for Parks and Recreation, the loan payments, it shows as being net of it's under by $69,000. So I just wanted to point out, so council did give the approval. We did put the lump sum payment of $156,000 on to pay down that loan. So that has been done. So that wasn't initially budgeted for, but we brought that to council a couple meetings ago. So that's been completed. The utilities are $188,000 under. That is probably partially due to the fact that this would have been the first full year the pool has been in operation, so you will find that. But moving forward, once they have so many years, of full operation, they'll be able to get a better handle on that. As far as the library and the museum, the only thing I just wanted to comment there, both of them, they get annual grants. They always typically get them in November or December, so they're not reflected in those results as well. And as far as note number 28, I just wanted to mention for the anniversary committee, I have the records to the end of September, so I'm working on a summary of that, and that should come for the next meeting, which I think is December 3rd. So it'll just be what I have up till September from them. So as far as the water and the wastewater, it's pretty much the same idea. The percentages are the same. The one thing to mention about salaries and benefits, it is sometimes difficult to budget for those because there is the crossover. If Public Works needs some of the individuals from water, wastewater, they will move back and forth, but their salaries will be billed to where they were working. So like I say, sometimes that's a little difficult to pinpoint. As far as that, the contracted services, that's the Aqua contract, those were billed to the end of October. And then as far as the transfers to the reserve funds, those, right now, they reflect what the budgeted amount was approved at. But by the time the year end happens and we have finalized numbers, that could go up or down. So I'm gonna leave it at that for now. If there's any questions.
So before we start doing any cartwheels or backflips, we're at 72% with 2 months left, but the unknown factor is the billings still to come in. At least we're trending in the right direction. Not gonna do any backflips yet. One of the other things, I know we're not gonna get into this tonight, but the water and wastewater management budgets, we won't really discuss it tonight because it's under review, but we are, for the public to know, we are looking at what we're going to need for next year before December 31st, in the hopes of not getting a surprise in or May or June. So we're working towards that in the next month or so when we get into the budget area. Councillor Owen?
Yeah, first, Sherry, thanks for, you know how I love accounting. Thanks for a report that I almost understand. It took a lot of work, and I appreciate that. The lighting, street lighting loan payments, how much longer are we paying on that? Do you know?
If you give me 1 minute to bring,
And I'm gonna time you.
we can tell you, okay.
I think it was 7 years originally, wasn't it?
There's the streetlights and the waste cards, and I always get the two, mixed up, just 1 second. So you want the streetlights, so they are, they will be done in 2022.
Okay. And the other question I have, since I'm so in love with accounting, do you see anything that's causing bells and alarms to go off in what you've presented us tonight? Anything that we might not pick up as lay people?
Not, let's put it this way, if I would have brought it up, which is why I did want to bring up the OPP. Anything like that you can't control and could come out of
Yeah.
left field. And like I say, I'll keep a folder and put those in so that they're taken into account in 2020. But like I say, the OPP one was the first one that I've seen that, because like I say, we did not budget for the 98.
Okay.
But like I say, offhand, no, I'm not.
Okay, I know, that's a cautious no.
Yes.
Thanks, Sherry.
Okay.
I echo Councillor Owen's comments about a readable report. It's a lot easier to understand in this format, so we thank you for doing that. Is there any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you, Sherry. Sudbury resolution.
So this is a resolution that came through our AMO website, and staff had asked that council please take a look at it and possibly support it. It has to do with joint and several liability, which I'm not really very up on, but it has to do with during a court case, if a municipality is deemed to be 1% at fault of something, because the municipality has deeper pockets, it could pay the biggest price. And so, so Greater Sudbury is endorsing AMO's call for the provincial government to review the joint and several liability practice, and they're asking municipalities to also support.
So is that in the long term, looking at a savings?
It could possibly be a savings. It depends on lawsuits that happen. And they're just looking to have it being fairly distributed to how much at fault a municipality is, that's how much the municipality should have to pay.
Yeah, so no one municipality then takes a huge hit.
Exactly.
Yep, makes sense.
So I have a resolution. It's moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The Council of the Town of Kirkland Lake supports the City of Greater Sudbury in its endorsement of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's call for the provincial government's review of the principle of joint and several liability to produce changes that provide additional protection for municipalities, such as the adoption of a model of full proportionate liability, among other measures, and that this resolution be forwarded to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, the Attorney General for Ontario, and John Vantoff, MPP.
All in favor? Passed. Amendments to the hiring and nepotism policy.
Okay, the next one is, I'm asking council if you would approve amendment to the hiring and nepotism policy that allows for discretion of the interim chief administrative officer to do some amendments. And this is because we do have some vacancies in staff right now, and we do want to make sure that the hiring process carries on in the absence of an HR manager. So we're just asking if council would please give discretion to the interim CAO in this interview process.
There's no dramatic changes gonna be anticipated, but it just make the process a little smoother. And you're right, the fact that we don't have an HR manager, decisions have to be made.
Yes, and our
So-
policy is written, and right now we will have to deviate from the policy, so this just makes everything legal.
Any further comments?
Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council has approved the hiring and nepotism policy dated December 15th, 2015, and that council has amended the policy by bylaw 19-106 to establish council's involvement in the hiring process of treasurer and clerk, and that council acknowledges it is necessary to deviate from the hiring and nepotism policy to allow for the continuation of staff hiring over the next few months. Now therefore, Council of the Town of Kirkland Lake approves that the existing hiring and nepotism policy will be followed as closely as possible, and that in the instances where deviation is necessary, the interim chief administrative officer will give full discretion is given full discretion to set a process, and that any deviation in process will be in writing and filed with HR.
Any further comments? All in favor? Passed. Ashley, Manager of Planning and Land Development.
Okay, so the planning report that was written by Rick Hunter from Planscape was circulated to council and to the public. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. Essentially, what you need to know is that the zoning amendment as it currently sits does not conform with the official plan, and therefore a recommendation to approve without conditions is not possible from a planning perspective. The way the studies, or the way the report was written, it gave three options for council to consider. One was to deny fully, based on the fact that the lakeshore capacity study was not completed and was missing sufficient information. There was the opportunity to defer and have the applicant submit the necessary information and reconsider the rezoning application at that time, or to approve based on conditions that a holding provision be placed on the property, so that they have the ability to complete the requirements within that lake capacity study and get the necessary information to council, and at that point they could remove the holding provision and proceed with developing the land. So there was multiple questions and concerns raised by the public, and he did a pretty good job at addressing these. There was also some questions directly from council that were circulated as well, some responses to those. Is there anything else outstanding that you guys require from staff or from the consultant in order to make your decision? So just to be clear, tonight we are not passing the bylaw, we're not considering the bylaw. That is something that will come up at the next council meeting. But what I need to know is whether there's any other questions you may have that you want addressed prior to making this decision.
I've got a few questions. The M&R report, I guess it goes back to 1978, stated that the lake was overdeveloped. Has there been any significant change that would contradict that?
That's why the lake capacity study was required in the first place, because of that issue, right? So the lake capacity study was commissioned, was a mandatory requirement to the rezoning application in order to depict whether or not there was a change in the lake quality or further issues with the lake quality. The issue with the lake capacity study that was submitted was that it didn't provide all of the sufficient information that to meet the handbook requirements.
If we did pass this bylaw, or this change in request, does the official plan have to be rewritten? Because this kind of rewrites the whole plan.
No,
No?
not at all. The official plan, the only thing within the official plan that would be, there's a statement within it that says that a lake capacity study is required prior to developing on Nettie Lake for any new lot development. So they have fulfilled the requirements of doing a lakeshore capacity study. The argument is just that it is not sufficient enough. So there's missing information. So if the information is gathered and it is proven by professional environmentalists that there's no further impact on the lake, then there's no reason, it would conform with the official plan to allow development to occur without having to do an official plan amendment.
Yeah, I guess the one comment I have is that when we go back from 1978, it took 20 years to put this subdivision plan together and to get the town to buy in and the residents. At that time, the Ministry of Housing was in charge of subdivisions approvals. We haven't really followed the terms of that plan subdivision over the years, and I believe we've neglected that area against further development, and that's something that I'm not blaming anybody in particular, because we're going back 45 years, but it certainly shows the need today that those rules be followed. And I don't see how we can just automatically change them that easy without the Ministry of Housing approval. Is that a fair comment? Can they be changed?
Yes, it can be. So the ministry's, the subdivision agreement that was put in place, there's nothing in there saying that, I mean,
It's set in
it's,
stone for life.
yeah, things change, things improve, septic systems improve, technology improves. The applicant or the owner of a property always has the ability to amend a zoning bylaw or amend an official plan. The subdivision agreement itself doesn't say that there's no room for development. It says that it's, the lake capacity study is a requirement prior to conducting any new development on the land. If the lake capacity study came back and it's negative, then absolutely, we shouldn't be developing on the lake. But if the lakeshore capacity study came back positively, that's all the ministry is looking for, is for us to do the due diligence or require the due diligence to be done prior to making a decision that could have further effect on the lake.
Okay, there are 3 recommendations there, and 2 of them relate to passing the rezoning with conditions. To me, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. Would we not want to get these conditions in place before we rezoned?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the way the holding provision works. So just to kind of give you an understanding of this, holding provision is something that you throw on. So let's say you pass, you're in favor of the application proceeding so long as they're capable of meeting all of these criteria. You put the holding provision on the property and nothing can happen until all of those conditions and all of those things are taken into account. The decision will come back to another zoning amendment at council to say, we got all the necessary information, here it is, it's sufficient, and at that point you could remove the holding provision. If you approved in principle that it was going to get approved, if they gave you all this information and then deny it, then you'll probably end up at an LPAT hearing. If you, they get all the necessary information, you proceed with removing the holding provision because it's satisfactory information and met the requirements that you gave them in that, with that holding provision, you'd approve and let them go through the 20-day appeal period, and they could proceed.
Number 3, that holding position, what isn't clear in my mind is, does that mean the owner of the property can sell the property,
Yep. They could sell the property right now.
but that doesn't mean that whoever buys it is gonna get a building permit?
No, they could sell the property. So if let's say today you decided that you wanted to approve the application with a holding provision, and the holding provision to be removed once all of these conditions are met, as identified in here, they could sell the property. The property would then be sold with that zoning with special, I think he mentions it here, rural residential special exemption zone. And the onus would then be on the new owner to provide all that detailed information. So the new owner cannot proceed with a building permit until he met all of those conditions and came to us with another rezoning application to have that holding provision removed.
So would that be registered on the title of the properties?
Yep, it's just a zone, so we put a holding zone you'd have to develop a new,
And then
what the
it's up to
conditions are
them
going to
to-
be. And it's essentially going through a second zoning amendment. So they're doing a zoning amendment right now to add the holding zone with the new zone. And then you have another zoning amendment that would come back later once the information's gathered, to remove the holding provision. So it comes to council twice.
Sorry, I hogged up.
That's okay.
Other councillors? Comments? Councillor Owen?
Yeah, my concern with this is that a number of people that are out there have not complied with current zoning. And they either knew or should have known that what they were doing was non-compliant. And I guess it comes down to an issue of fairness here, because here we have somebody who's applied through the proper channels so he can dispose of land that he has, which is no longer of use to him, and we're making him jump through all the hoops. So I have a little problem with fairness here. I don't particularly think what is happening is necessarily fair. Having said that, I'm not sure there's a lot as a counselor I can do except state my issue with the way this has happened. I would be in favor of getting the information first. But again, like I say, a lot of people out there did not comply with the zoning application and did not have to pay for a study. You know, so it almost like we're asking this guy to spend a lot of money when other people just went out and did it anyways, which, you know, I don't think is particularly fair. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm not happy with the whole situation.
Fairness really, I don't think is gonna come into this, because two wrongs don't make a right. I think, I readily admit, I believe the town itself has neglected this over the years, and it should never have come to the situation that we have today. We have to make it right for everybody involved. But I think we need more information to come back to council to make an informed decision. I don't think we can make it here tonight based on 10-minute discussion. That's my opinion. Councillor Ivanov.
Yeah, no, I have a real concern over further development of Netty Lake. I understand what's happened out there. I understand that, there's been an issue with water. I hear people complaining about the fact that the wildlife has disappeared off the lake, ducks, loons, all of that. I don't see how any further development at the present time or even in the near future would be of benefit to Kirkland Lake or to the residents of Netty Lake. I would have a real concern with us letting 6 more lots be developed on a piece of property that are on a lake that is probably over saturated with houses and cottages that are presently being used. Some are being used as cottages and maybe redeveloped into more permanent homes. I know that there's people will winterize their cottages and consider them cottages, even though they're permanent homes. And I just don't see us allowing more development on a lake like that. I just I hear Ray Fenney's study, and it scares the crap out of me that if I had a place on there, I would not want to, and I don't. I would not want more development on a lake that's oversaturated, and the trailer park there is just it's an unknown. Nobody knows what happens. I know that if I had a trailer there, I'd be inviting my friends out to come and join me and have some fun out there, and that just means that the Knights of Columbus Park would be utilized more than just the people that are using trailers or putting trailers there, because it is a small lake, and there's been a lot of development for a very, very small piece of water.
Councillor Owens?
Other than the lake shore capacity study, what other information would we need to make a decision on this one? Like, is there something else missing that I'm not seeing that?
I think he mentioned the criteria of the lake capacity assessment. What was missing was the Secchi disc. There's 3 or 4 things within the lake capacity, so I think I have it here.
So, but they're all tied into that lake capacity study, right?
The other one was potentially looking at the potential wetlands that were in that one bay. I think there was something like that mentioned as well. But yeah, sorry, he mentions here testing for phosphorus, dissolved oxygen, and Secchi disc. Secchi disc. Okay. So those are the big ones in order to meet the criteria of the official plan.
And that burden falls on a landowner, right?
Yeah.
Not on us. We
No.
don't have to pay for any of this.
Nope.
Councillor White?
So I do have a concern, like Rick, now that we've been publicly made aware of the deviation from the original plans by property owners out there, what is the municipality's responsibility, knowing now that the subdivision agreement has been deviated, where there was X amount of cottages, now they're permanent residences? What is our responsibility as a municipality about those changes that have occurred there, environment-wise, etc.?
I'd have to go back to the subdivision agreement and look exactly what it says in regards to cottage versus year-round. I can't recall if they've made that daily or that different, that have identified that within the subdivision agreement. The subdivision agreements are typically just based on the lots. So the lots have been created. There hasn't been any, in my opinion, I don't think there's been anything that's out of compliance with the subdivision agreement.
There was a report or a letter that some of us got. I didn't get it, but Casey had, in regards to the septic systems
Yep.
on the lake. We really don't know
Right.
who has them
Mm-hmm.
or how many there are.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scary thought.
Yep. Yeah, and it's one that has, we did have some of the conversations with Smithsville Health Unit probably about a year, maybe a year and a half ago. And we looked at the possibility of getting the health unit to come and do an inspection of all properties on Netty Lake. We ran into some challenges because they technically can't just go on someone's property without permission to go inspect unless there's there's concern of it leaking or causing contamination. So there's a lot of things that we would have had to tackle in order to get that to go ahead. But yeah, no, it is very scary. A lot of the reasons why we don't have documentation about the lots on Nettie is because the township becoming part of Kirkland Lake is relatively new. A lot of the documentation that would have been put in place, all the documentation for septic system permits that would have been given by the health unit would have been based on roll number, property owners, and he does mention that in his letter. The only ones that we currently have are the ones that are relatively newer, and a lot of them are class 4 septic systems.
Given the fact that Planscape's report is a little more clearer than the original report that we received, and they did point out some, I'll call them deficiencies in the report, or lack of information that wasn't covered off. I would prefer going back through that report and having another look at it, your department, and coming up with some of the concerns that you feel should be addressed before we can make an informed decision. Right now, I couldn't support this one way or the other without further information. I am concerned of overcrowding on the lake, and we're not getting into watercraft or anything. This is nothing to do with this request. But we still need more information. There are some things pointed out here by Planscape that weren't covered off. So I think reviewing that report and trying to get some clarification as to how that can be done or when it should be done.
You mean in terms of the missing information in the lake capacity study?
Yeah, but there's other, the oxygen levels, and there's 2 or 3 things in there that are important items.
Yeah.
That Planscape noted that I think we need more answers on.
Yes. Yeah, that's the recommendation that we have as well.
Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I'm still concerned about the septic situation, okay?
Definitely.
The only place that we know for sure that has approved septic systems is the trailer park, okay? The Knights of Columbus Trailer Park, okay? They've got brand-new systems were just put in this past year. Now, if I was buying a piece of property out there and it had a cottage on it, one of the requirements of the mortgage would be for me to show that it has an approved septic system on it. At least that's been my experience with buying a cottage. It's one of the things that I was asked for. You know, I don't think it should be such a hard thing to find out how many, you know. I mean, if the real concern here is the quality of the water, then they should be, you know, the residents out there should be more than willing to show us that they have approved septic systems. And that's a big concern, because that's a big source of phosphorus in the lake. Causes weed growth, causes oxygen depletion, chokes out your fish life. I'm disappointed in the health unit because I know a number of years ago, probably about, I'm guessing at about 10 years based on the septic system that I have on Susquehanna. And earlier than that, they did an inspection in Kenogami. And people were ordered to replace septic systems if they didn't meet. Now all of a sudden, they said, well, no, we charge for everything. And I know that's a sign of the times. But I'm still very concerned about the number of septic systems that are on that lake and how many of them meet the approval, how many of them have the right setback from the lake.
According to that letter, Casey, if I read it right, if you call the request an inspection by the Timiskaming Health Unit, it's going to cost $650.
Yeah.
That certainly would discourage a lot of people from doing it. That's part of the issue.
But but like I say,
These things should have been done a long time ago.
I know, but if the real issue here is water quality, then the people on the lake should be more than willing to provide us with documentation to show us that their septic tanks are not, meet provincial requirements. That's all I'm saying. You know, I'd like to see that information.
Councillor White?
Don't even have to put up my hand anymore. But that's why I asked Ashley, what is our responsibility as the municipality? If we know there is issues, because it has been brought to light through letters and discussions here, we know about, there's been some changes. Our expert has told us, no, the municipality doesn't have any responsibility. Unfortunately, in this case, I think that's a non-issue now. Because if we don't have, we've been told that we don't have any responsibility, that's not council's scope, then
If it's pertaining to septic systems, it'd be the Timiskaming Health Unit. They're the ones that provide that service. So, I mean, I will definitely do a little bit more due diligence to look at whether there's anything that can come back to us regarding the septic system specifically. When we're looking at the Nettie Lake as a whole, sure, there's plenty of things that we can implement from a planning standpoint. We looked at that. We looked at our site plan control. We do plan on bringing that back to council. That's something that I fully support. The only thing is I was really hoping to get the zoning bylaw updated to reflect the policies within the official plan before I touch site plan control. And it's been hard. It's been a very hard delay because my roles has changed quite a bit since I originally started that process in 2017. So I can tell you that the scope of work for the zoning bylaw update is almost done. It should be out within the next couple of weeks for a consultant to tackle that. And part of that process will be to update the site plan control bylaw at the same time. And it will be in the site plan control agreement a recommendation from us to say that waterfront properties be designated as site plan control areas to tackle that. In the site plan control agreement, you can insist that they get their septic systems regularly looked at, and you can actually request for every 10 years for you to get a report. The challenge is it's not going to work for anything that was built already. It's only moving forward. And I mean, that's the biggest problem, yeah.
Councillor Owens?
Ultimately, like, I'm not in favor of development on small lakes like that. I think it's past the point of, like, overcapacity, but if the landowner conforms to like, checks off every single box and does his due diligence, and we vote on it one way or the other, and the other party that's got the short end of the stick goes to LPAT, is there anything in the legislation that can stop somebody from if they conform to everything, can they be stopped? Can development on those properties be stopped?
It depends on what the LPAT decision is.
Yeah, but
At the end of
legally,
the
is there
day.
something to stand on to say just because my neighbor doesn't want me to build a house,
No.
then, you know what, you're not gonna build a house?
It would be a personal choice not to, but
Yeah.
theoretically, no, there's nothing that would stop them. I think the important thing to remember is, so if council does decide to go with an approval with a holding provision, if you were going to appeal that decision made by council, it would be at that point that you would be wanting to appeal it, because you're appealing the decision of approving the change to residential on condition of all these things. Appealing it once the holding provision's done, you're basically trying to take the property from a residential cottage to a residential cottage, but then you've already fulfilled all your criteria. There's no case there, right? Your case is with specifically going from open space to residential, right? So, I mean, you gotta be very careful in which one you decide to go with, when you're making your decision at next meeting. And this one here is the big one. It's not after the holding provisions are done, unless they're not capable of getting the necessary information. I'd also like to mention that in the options that were presented, I figured you'd probably ask this question, and I meant to mention it at the start. When it comes to the deferral, the only thing you need to be cognizant on is that there is a deadline to have a decision made through zoning amendment process, so 6 months, 180 days. So if we defer and then we don't get the information, then we're subject to going to LPAT as well. Okay?
Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable making a decision at the next meeting without that missing information. I'm a lot more comfortable with deferring If the information comes in within the 6 months, then we'll have all the information to base a decision on. If it doesn't come in, then we don't approve it, because we still don't have the information. And I could live with that. I have one question for you, Ashley. What is that zoned around Nettie Lake, lakefront properties? What is that zoned as?
I think it's RR 01. So
Which
rural
means in
residential
English?
01. Sorry, rural residential on one side, and there's residential seasonal, I think, on the other, or something like that. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know it's homes on one side and cottages on, no, is it cottages all around?
Anyways, I
Homes
think
on one side, cottages on the other, yeah.
I know we've had so many discussions about Nettie Lake that I'm a little, my head's spinning a little. It's sort of like a whirlpool in the lake, except the lake's not big enough to have one. But I think I need clarification on what the zonings are out there, because I'm under the impression that certain things may have happened out there, but in fact, maybe they didn't. Maybe it was zoned correctly for what happened out there. Okay, and I need, this is an emotional issue as well as a scientific issue. And I need all the information so I can make the best possible decision. And I need it in black and white, because I'm not the smartest guy at the table. So I don't need RR0 whatever. I need
want the
to know
permanent uses.
exactly what that means.
I know one of the biggest challenges with Nettie is the seasonal aspect of it.
Yes,
Okay, so that's, there is half the lake that's designated for just cottage development. The issue is enforcing that.
Well-
So with Rick Hunter, he mentioned the last meeting that majority of Ontario do not have seasonal.
but if they do
Permitted
not
uses.
have another address, then that's pretty obvious that's not a seasonal residence. If they only have one address, that's their permanent residence. That's pretty, doesn't seem like rocket science to me.
It's extremely, yeah, it's extremely,
Yeah, but
extremely.
it's still permanent residence if you only have a post office box, because you're not living in your post office box.
The reason why the majority of municipalities don't regulate it is because it is so complicated to prove in court that you end up spending more on legal than you do trying to. So the appropriate way to look at it is likely to go to, you allow the year-round development to happen because there's no regulating which season they're in.
But if we do that, we're not protecting the water, because let me tell you, a septic system over 12 months compared to 3 months, there's a big difference on the impact on the environment. So whether they're permanent residents or seasonal residents makes a big difference, because even as I go to my cottages in the wintertime too. And if I had my water hooked up, we could use our septic system there too, but it would be a weekend here and there. It wouldn't be a wife and kid and whatever, 12 months a year. And it wouldn't be all the gray water going into the system and doing dishes and doing laundry. So there's a big difference in terms of the impact on the lake between seasonal and permanent residents. So if we're talking water quality here, I don't think we can just sweep that under the carpet and pretend that.
Yeah, and that's all things that would come up with the zoning bylaw update, and that's definitely one of the biggest challenges we'll have within that update, is looking at Nettie and what's appropriate. It's okay. Uh-oh.
Ashley, I have one more question,
Yeah.
which I don't think we've really covered off. Some of these lots take up what they call the green space or parkland. It's going to wipe that out. Now, I've lived in 14 different communities, and there is always, when a new subdivision is approved, there is always parkland or green space as part of the package. I don't know how we can wipe that out after the original rules of engagement for this subdivision had that in there.
So in my opinion, the rules of the subdivision agreement, the way that works is it's parkland dedication. They dedicate parkland to the municipality. Anything that was
Yeah.
dedicated as parkland is in our ownership through blocks along the subdivision. So there's property that we own that are designated open space in that subdivision that meet that 5% criteria. This is above and beyond that. This is nothing to do with that parkland dedication. Two separate things. The reason the open space zone was established on any, and this is my opinion, this is what, based on what I've read and my take on it, is it was there to stop development until a lake capacity study could be ordered and done. So that there was no development happening on those pieces of property until we got to a point where a lake capacity could prove there's not going to be any impact. And you'd have to go through this process. You'd have to rezone. That's my understanding.
Do we agree to bring this back to, after further information, a report to council? Councillor Adams.
Yep, so for the further information, like, are we gonna pay for a lakeshore capacity study? Is that what, so what would the cost of one of those be anyways?
The consultant, they could probably tell you. How much did it cost?
About $8,000 right now, counting other things now. The other problem you're gonna run into is you're gonna do a study in the middle of winter, ice is on the lake, cannot be done. The earliest study could be done would be somewhere around May. That's why my recommendation, put a hold in and we do the study at a further date. And if the study does not come back positive, then there's no change.
So, yeah, deferral may not work to our advantage because I think they submitted their application at the beginning of summer.
I'm not in
Yeah,
favor of passing a resolution to go ahead with this before I see more information.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
my opinion. Do we have a resolution,
I have a resolution with the
Councillor Owens? Owen?
Yeah. Going ahead with a hold on the property would not be my first choice. But due to something called winter time, I can see where the lake study can't be done.
True.
So my second choice would be to go ahead with a hold on the property until we get the study results back. And then if it doesn't meet the requirement, then it's gotta stay as green space. So I think that's our second best option. It's something I could support. We gotta bring this to a resolution. I can't deal with this the rest of my, the rest of the 3 years that I'm sitting here. People want answers. We need to get them answers. I mean, it can't be developed if the study comes back and says the lake can't handle it. So the zoning would stay what it is now.
It would stay with the holding provision,
Yeah.
which then could never be developed anyways.
Yeah,
It just-
so it's a lesser of two evils.
Do you want a resolution to that effect?
Yeah, that we go, that next council meeting, we vote on, because this is coming back next council meeting, right?
Yeah, I
For-
think what I
Okay,
can do is bring the direction would be to bring a bylaw that states that we're going to accept I'm gonna present it as you're accepting the change with the holding provision and draft my bylaw. That way you guys can defeat or pass or do what you need to do with it, but that will be what I bring to you
yeah,
with further information.
with the holding thing on it, right?
With the holding provision
Because
on it.
nothing can happen then until,
Yeah.
now, just thought of another thing. It may not be the best of two solutions here. Because if the lake study comes back and says that that lake water can accept the further development, then the change automatically goes in place.
Right.
But then we wouldn't be concerned about the water quality because science has said it can handle it, so, okay.
I will also bring a English report. Not a Planese one.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Rick.
Okay, go ahead, Joanne.
Resolution that's moved by Councillor Rick Owens, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council received the final planning recommendation report submitted by Planscape and approves recommendation number 3 to approve the application and direct staff to prepare a zoning bylaw to be presented at the next council meeting, establishing a holding condition that will be removed upon satisfactory completion of conditions listed.
Can we have a recorded vote, please?
Yes, it's only a resolution.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed?
2-3?
Defeated.
4-3? Or
So-
defeated?
So you have 2 other
Options.
options. You can deny the application as submitted, or you can defer the application depending completion of the following by the applicant, an updated lakeshore study and a site development plan for each lot.
No matter what, we can't defeat it by resolution. So I gotta bring
No,
a,
it's a
I gotta
bylaw.
bring a bylaw to council no matter
So
what.
bylaw has to come regardless.
And then you've gotta
And then
defeat it as
council
bylaw.
votes on it.
Councillor Owen?
My understanding of procedure is right here. What we are doing is giving Ashley direction.
Just to bring it forward.
Now, we just defeated one of our options. I think we still have 3 options. We can go with one of the other 2 options, or we can leave it up to Ashley to come back with a bylaw without our direction, based on her professional.
Or I can bring back 3 bylaws and put them on the agenda for next meeting, and you can,
Duke it out.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
well, why don't we do that then? Because I don't want to put Ashley under the gun, and I don't want to spend more time talking about this tonight. It'll give people the chance that want to get a hold of us to have more input. And I'm sure we will hear from people, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Perhaps we could make that a meeting, committee of the whole?
Oh, no, because you can't
you
pass a
can't,
bylaw in a
well, that's
committee of the
true,
whole.
yeah.
No,
You'd have to do committee of
yeah.
whole and then close.
you've already had a public meeting.
Okay.
Okay. So then, we're not gonna do anything with this. What I'm gonna do is bring the 3 bylaws back, put them on for
Okay.
next council.
Okay.
Okay.
Rick, are you, the next one is the drinking water system operational plan? He's not,
No, I'm not.
oh, okay.
Okay, these next few should be a little bit quicker. So this one here has to do with the acceptance of the operational plan for Kirkland Lake drinking system. So the drinking water quality management standard requires that an operational plan be maintained by Aqua. It must be endorsed by us and accepted by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. So the quality management system and operational plan have been in place since 2010. It's been reviewed annually and updated to remain current with systems and organization changes, processes, procedures, and the DWQMS standards. So Aqua is responsible for the implementation and ongoing maintenance of this system, and must meet the requirements of the DWQMS. They've made some changes, mostly to reflect conformance with DWQMS 2.0. So I've listed what the changes were to this document. We did get, Aqua has reviewed this, top management personnel have endorsed the revised operational plan. I believe it was attached for your review. And I did make Eric come tonight to answer any questions, as this is a little bit over my head, but I figured he'd be able to answer anything that, that you may have.
Seems reasonable. Any other comments? No? Go ahead, Joanne.
It's moved by Counselor Casey Owens, seconded by Counselor Rick Owen. The council received the operational plan for the Kirkland Lake drinking water system and authorizes the mayor and clerk to sign the required documentation showing council's endorsement of the plan.
All in favor? Passed.
The next report has to do for a request to change the overall operating authority for sewage collection. So the Town of Kirkland Lake sewage collection system falls under Ontario Regulation 12904, which is licensing of sewage works operators regulations. Under this regulation, the owner or operating authority must designate an overall responsible operator, and they hold a license that's specific for the type of facility that you're using, or in this case, it's sewage collections that we're looking for. The ORO must be a knowledgeable, experienced staff and has to be available at all times to provide operational oversight. So in Kirkland Lake, the role of ORO, we've got 4 ORO responsibilities, 1 for water treatment, 1 for water distribution, 1 for sewage treatment, and 1 for sewage collections. Aqua currently holds that status for water treatment, distribution, and sewage treatment. The role of ORO for sewage collection has remained a town responsibility, and it was under the purview of the waterworks foreman. So with the recent retirement of our waterworks foreman and the pending strategic review of the organization, we thought it may be a good idea for that responsibility to be contracted to Aqua for now. We don't want this to be a permanent change. It's just one that we didn't want to put it on someone else's responsibility and have it change later, especially with the strategic organization just 1 month away. We have that report coming to council shortly. The other part was that we did not have a qualified non-union representative to take on the responsibility. So we felt it was probably better to just give that authority to Aqua for now and take it back when we have an appropriate person set up for that position.
Councillor White?
So what does this look like in a working term? So if there's issues, a call would go out to Aqua?
Nope.
So it would still be
Yep.
in-house, just
They have to keep this person apprised of what is happening, what's transpiring. So a good example, I mean, the way I look at ORO, I look at it from the water perspective because that's typically how I see it. They're the overall responsible ones. So if something were to happen, they are most liable. They're the one that goes to jail. But sewer's a little different. It's not as stringent. It's just keeping that person apprised of what's transpiring. So essentially, it's there's some reporting too, I think, that needs to get done, right, Eric? And from a operating standpoint, it's essentially our waterworks guys calling them when something happens, a sewer break and keeping them up to speed. But no, it doesn't change the overall operations.
Councillor Adams?
So what makes a person qualified?
They have certain, there's actually, it's not exams, it's exams, certifications. I know it from water, I don't know it from sewer, but they have to have a certain amount of examinations completed per facility that they're operating.
And we did have someone that did have it, that was Dawn? Yeah.
Dawn had it, yeah.
Okay.
And we do have some staff that are capable, they're not, but they're unionized. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Further comments, questions?
I have a resolution that is moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier. The council designates Ontario Clean Water Agency as the overall operating authority for sewage collection in the town of Kirkland Lake.
All in favor? Unanimous, passed. Ashley, municipal modernization funding grant application?
Yes, this one came very quickly. On November 12th, it was announced that the ministry has set up the Municipal Modernization Program. It's to help small and rural municipalities conduct new service delivery reviews. So they actually are providing between $20,000 to $200,000 worth of funding at 100% rate to look at service reviews or implementing recommendations from previous reviews, undertaking a range of projects such as IT solutions or processing improvements, all geared towards cost savings and efficiencies. So you're probably thinking this would have been great last year when we looked at Strategy Corp. But what we're planning on doing here, and we've actually been in communication with Strategy Corp, was to look at a phase 2 of the project. So there's some things that they have touched on, very basic in this review, that they'd like to carry forward and put in a more detailed review of. So one of them is the in-depth service delivery review. So we did end up getting an outline of what Strategy Corps could do that would meet the criteria of this funding application. They're looking at the service review, optimal organizational design, exploring new technologies and applications that can modernize administrative tasks, knowledge management, service delivery. Everything ends up leading to improved lead and cycle times, resident-centric services, and increased value-added staff activities. So the cost that they put together for us on this type of initiative is about $115,000, and it would tie right directly into the recommendations that they're proposing in the project that they've already been working on. So this was a very quick. This came out of nowhere. The deadline for applications December 6th, so there wasn't much of a time to think about what could possibly be thrown in here. So the one thing that we did look at was whether we could look at opportunities to invest in IT solutions or software programming changes with capital asset management. The problem is we didn't have the scope of work ready to go with prices and to be able to submit in this for the application in time. This was relatively easier to put together because the scope of work was essentially already sort of factored in with Strategy Corps' next step.
Just one question first, Rick,
Yeah.
sorry. We do not have to do an RFP for this if it's a grant, is that correct?
You know what, I'm not sure.
I'm kind of shocked at the price, I gotta be honest with you. I wish I had made a career change early in life.
Yeah, it's, I'll be sure, it was one of the questions I had too, and whether or not we had to worry about going to RFP. Eve, do you know?
Yeah, I understand. Councillor Owen?
Okay, Ashley. As you know, I'm easily confused.
Okay.
You brought up the figure of $115,000. What exactly is that for? Is that what we're paying to Strategy Corps? Or is that $115,000 that we're gonna spend making this municipality more efficient? Because we already know in a number of areas that we're doing work manually. HR is one of those areas. The clerk's office is another area. We already know we have these deficiencies. So are we paying Strategy Corps another $115,000 to come back and tell us that we got other deficiencies?
Yeah.
Or could we be applying for that $115,000 to modernize our clerk's office and our HR office?
Preliminary.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did Strategy Corps' name get involved in this discussion?
It was essentially, so we've already done Strategy Corps
Eve,
stage.
could you come up to the table?
We've already done Strategy Corps stage 1, right? And part of the feedback that we got back or got from them, and Eve could clarify, is there's more that they would have liked to have been able to focus on. There's deficiencies in other areas that they'd like to be able to focus on. They outlined 4 work streams in their quote. business planning and performance management, so that was a big one, so creating a business plan for each of the departments. Looking at service level standards, so service level prioritization, framework creation, and then looking at ways to monitor over the years to see where we're going. Organization design implementation, so change plan creation and implementation, priority job description, also potentially looking at job evaluations and how to manage that process. And then there's the technology adoption and implementation process. So it's supporting infrastructure evaluation, looking at different technology that could assist us in becoming more efficient, and the process redesign, so how we process things.
Okay, being the type of person that I am, I look at that as a very good sales job by Strategy Corps. They got in the door with their first contract, and now that they're in the door, they've said, wow, we can provide you all these other contracts too. And quite frankly, I'm anxiously waiting for the Strategy Corps report, because I do have some concerns that I've shared with the other counselors. And with, I think I shared one of them with Eve as well, over coffee one day. But in any case, we have, we're spending $115,000 to come up with a plan. Is that basically what we're doing?
So it's not only a plan, the issue also, oh, there you go. So the issue is also, we're so short-staffed. We all, like, there'll be a person almost with us for a few months to try and figure out what we're lacking. We're lacking in a lot of departments, and there'll be some recommendations that are gonna come out of this report, and those are the recommendations we're gonna need to apply for the second phase. Example, we need to come up with a procurement system that works, that works with our asset management, that works for our equipment and everything that we do. So that has to be researched, and we haven't got the staff to do that. So they're actually gonna spend, I had a long conversation with them this morning, but of course we'll have to go to an RFP, because we can't just straight given, there'll be a scope of work, and we'll get another quote but we have to put a number in there. So number, we start at 115, if we get a better deal for someone else, it may cost us less, but this is what we have to start with. If we don't put an application in, we'll get $0. So it's made for that, but there's a lot of things. We've been talking about job evaluation. The union is fairly simple to do. It's a long process. We can do that. There's a process. It's fairly straightforward. But when you start to get into management, it's best done by a third party. So it's someone outside the municipality. So this way, it's not unbiased.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that as soon as you mentioned RFP, because I really hate single quote things that we've approved, and sometimes we have no choice. And we could put out an RFP and get one quote too. But at least we attempt.
There's other people to do this.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I think too, even, and Rick, in all fairness, they probably highballed it. The one advantage that they do have is doing the strategic organizational review is there's a fair amount of pre-work that will go into the operations review or service review. So it should be an advantage to them. So it'll be interesting to see if it goes to RFP, what they come up with. I'm not saying they're trying to gouge us. I found it pricey. I'm first one to admit that. But we'll see when the dust settles. But we had, as you said, Eve, we had to have some numbers to submit the application. So it's preliminary.
And it was easier for us to get the quote this way because they already know us?
Yes.
If we already started with someone, we wouldn't meet the deadline.
We wouldn't have had it.
No, there's no way to meet the deadline, because it's a long process.
Councillor Adams?
Yep, it's a request to apply for funding, so I'm okay with that. Putting money into a service review, that 2016, we had one done, and there's still items outstanding. And getting another review done and asking for another service review, I don't get that part. So I'm going to have some difficulty on that, but for the part of request to apply for funding, I'm supportive of that because it's free money available, but if we had to put more money to get told that we have items outstanding, still have a fire master plan that needs to be implemented fully. We have other reports that we still need to work on, so I'm excited for the operational organizational review, but in the meantime, request to apply for funding, I'm in full support.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, Patrick, because we don't need another review that's gonna sit on the shelf collecting dust. But I think that this should be kind of seamless from the organizational review moving into the service review. Councillor Owen?
Ashley, tell me I heard you right, that this is 100% funding. The ratepayer has to put no dollars, basically?
That is correct.
Oh,
Christmas
you
came,
should have played that up bigger.
Sorry.
Christmas came
Yeah,
early.
no, I mean, we'd be foolish not to apply for 100%. Even if some of us thought it was a repeat of something that's already happened, we'd still be foolish, because in a new study, different people are preparing it, and the results could be quite different. So if it's 100% funding, hey, why stop at 115? Let's keep going.
And you have to be reasonable, so the funding is from 20,000 to 200,000. So if we ask for 2 months, we'll be competing against other municipalities, so have to keep it reasonable.
And it also had to be a project that was done in 6 months.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we only have that, so much time to do it.
Yeah. I speak fast too, so sometimes I'm just whipping through these.
So I have resolutions moved by Councillor Rick Owens, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier. The council directs staff to apply for funding under the Municipal Modernization Program for an in-depth service delivery review.
All in favor? Unanimous? Connecting Link funding application?
Yes, this funding application, the deadline's actually this Friday to get ahead on this one. This is the same Connecting Link funding program that we would have applied for in 2019. This is the 2020 allocation, so this is dedicating money towards the 2020 capital budget. I do need to change the numbers because we made some modifications to these. There was a 30% contingency. That's still in effect, I think, right? No, he brought it down to 15%, so he's back down to 15. But we also added the boulevard, paving of the boulevard and a curb, right?
Yes, and also I'd like to add, just before I came to the meeting, Casey, you sent us an email to look at a crosswalk at, so we'll look at that at the same time. It makes sense, but we're starting at that intersection. So I've already sent a request for a quote for an estimate to get the crosswalk, because we'll be right there. It's just in time, so I saw your email just before I got here, so we'll add to that, but the main idea is we have a deadline to apply for this Connecting Link, so we'll see if we can address the crosswalk. We'll put it as a provincial item, so we'll put it in the budget, and
So the new number is 800 and
it's gonna be a bit higher.
higher than that
Crosswalk,
if the
yeah,
crosswalk,
right,
if
with
we do the crosswalk.
Yep.
New number without the crosswalk, but with the paving of the boulevard and the curb, it's 859,00160. So it's
Councillor
slightly
Owens.
higher.
Yeah, I just wanted to specify, it wasn't something I have brought forward. It's a resident in Kirkland Lake that identified a concern, traffic coming around that curve going up towards the hospital, and I figured since we're in that
Makes
process
sense,
anyway,
yeah.
it just makes sense to,
Yeah, oh,
to
have
look
at
into it
Yeah,
at
for
this
sure.
point, so.
Yes.
Just for curiosity, the infrastructure in the ground, how long ago was that?
There is none in that area.
No, that's right, it's not there.
None there?
No.
It's the just the section before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Section before.
So where does the water and sewer lines come from?
The back. So Northern College is serviced through the trailer park, the
Oh, okay.
second
Yep.
entrance, I
Got it.
believe, and then the hospital is serviced through
From the
our
other-
area at our end. Yeah.
Yeah, so what we'd like to do, there's an improvement required on the south side, there's a curb, and then there's a seated area between the sidewalk, and those are really hard to maintain. You dump snow, you dump sand, and every year you have to go back in there, and it's a mess, so we've put a provisional item there to put some pavement there, just a paved boulevard, so it'll be easy to clean, and so because we have to start over every year.
No further comments? Joanne?
It's moved by Councillor Dennis Perrier, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen, The council approves the application to the Connecting Link Funding Program to repave Government Road East from Burnside Drive to the eastern town limits, which is the Northern College entrance.
All in favor? Approved. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Eve. Introduction, reading, and consideration of bylaws.
It's moved by Councillor Rick Owens, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier, that bylaw 19-1, what did I say, 111? It's not, I'm sorry, it's 111. Being a bylaw to appoint Yves LaBelle as interim chief administrative officer, repealing bylaw 18-043, be read a first, second, third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Unanimous. Welcome, Eve.
It's moved by Councillor Dennis Perrier, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen, that bylaw 19-112, delegating administrative powers to the interim chief administrative officer, repealing bylaw 19-110, be read a first, second, third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Passed. Welcome, Joanne.
Moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier, that bylaw 19-113, being a bylaw to appoint members to committees of council by adding Hunter Hamlin to the Kirkland Lake Youth Council Committee, be read a first, second, third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Welcome, Hunter. Confirmation bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier, that bylaw 19-114, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held November 19th, 2019, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Passed. Councilors' reports. Councillor Owens?
Yeah, last week I received not a complaint, but a concern voiced by a local resident about parking on Government Road where we changed the bylaw. And I said, oh, I'm surprised, because I'd been watching it myself, and the time before that I only saw one car there, so I thought we were doing good. So I kept my eyes open. Today I counted 6 cars in the no parking zone, so I'm just bringing that to the attention of I guess it's Ashley, I'm not sure, or Eve, so that, because if we don't get people out of that habit, then we might as well not have passed the bylaw. And as far as I'm concerned, they've had lots of notice now. The signs are there. We need to ticket them. And we do have a bylaw enforcement officer now. So I would encourage the, whoever's in charge of the bylaw officer to bring my concern to them. Also, I attended the Northern Prospectors Association monthly meeting last week. I think this is an industry that goes a lot, in this community goes unnoticed because they don't put up head frames, and most of them are small-time prospectors who don't put drills on properties. But they are the backbone of the mining industry. There are no new mines found without prospectors. And currently, they have some very real concerns about the new map staking system. According to what was said at the meeting, there are flaws in the computer programs, making it difficult for them to access information, making it difficult for them to conduct their business. And as a council, I think we at least have the right to, or we should at least acknowledge that that we support prospectors. They are the backbone of the mining industry. That's where it all starts. So hopefully down the road, when I get more information, more specific information, I'll request that we send a letter to the appropriate ministry asking to update the system so it works properly. Thank you.
Good point, Rick, because I think they do go by unnoticed, and they do a lot for the community. So thanks for pointing that out. Any further, Councillor White?
Now with the appointment of our latest Youth Council Committee member, Casey Owens Ashley, and I will be holding the first official meeting on Monday, November 25th at 4:15 for all that can make it, and emails will be going out now that we've had our last member appointed.
And thank you, Ashley, for stepping up to the plate to be the town representative. I'd just like to thank our previous interim CEO, Wilf Haas. He came into a tough situation. A lot of hard work went into it. As I've said before, the man has certainly worked his behind off, and we appreciate that, and welcome him back to his role as Economic Development Officer on his return. So thank you, Will, for all your efforts. A lot of good things have happened, and it's appreciated. Any other comments? And welcome, Eve. We look forward to working with you in all capacities. You'll be wearing a lot of hats.
Okay, so I have a resolution that's moved by Councillor Dennis Perrier, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council moved to an in-camera meeting pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act to discuss 2 items concerning identifiable persons and 1 item concerning the CAO search.
All in favor? Passed. Thank you.